What if I told you you could run an amazing marathon, feeling strong start to finish, punching through that 20-mile wall and devouring other runners in the closing miles? Because that's a reality I can make happen. However, that's most likely not going to be your reality, or it hasn't been your reality when you try to run faster than you're capable of. Rather than punching through the wall, you're going to get slapped in the face at 20 miles, grovel home, and finish relatively disappointed. And it's not so much the disappointment in the finish time that's still probably pretty good, or the amazing effort that you just put in. It's that sinking realization that you just wasted all that training and all that potential to do a time you could have done in training. Well, in this video, I want to introduce you to the benchmark bias when setting your goal marathon time, and how ignoring that goal completely could lead you to running the marathon of your dreams. To show you what I mean, I've got some more real-world data from another Steve chasing another sub 3-hour marathon. All right, time for a bit of audience participation. I've just entered you in a marathon next weekend. What is the fastest time you can run 100% guaranteed? Conditions are good, course is flat. 100% guarantee you can run this time next weekend. What is it? You got it? Okay, now what if I said you got to run 2 minutes faster? Should be all right, you know? Yeah, you could do that, surely. That should be fine. Okay, what about 5 minutes faster? Touch and go, right? You know, maybe you could do that. Next weekend, maybe. Well, what's your goal marathon time for your next marathon? Now, how close are those two times? The 5 minutes faster time and your goal marathon time? I want to see these in the comments, because mine was 5 minutes difference. Because I'm going to argue that that 5 minutes faster time is what you should be aiming for as your goal marathon time. Why? Because without the bias of a goal finish time, you reflected on your recent training history to establish a realistic time. Anchoring yourself with a time that you know you can do rather than one that you hope to do removes the benchmark bias. Instead of just trying to justify why you can do this arbitrary benchmark, you set a personalized goal specific to you. Then when I ask you to move backwards from that goal, you internalize how hard that would be relative to what you know you can do. I'll show you what I mean with another Steve chasing another 3-hour marathon. I'd been working with this Steve for a bit over a year, and his focus was entirely on ultra trail running. But to mix things up for the winter, he wanted to give a crack at the sub 3 dream. I knew he could handle 100 Ks in one go, so I decided to give him a micro build and a test marathon. Over 6 weeks, we mainly did a few long runs, a couple of progressives, and a trail half marathon, and then I threw him in the deep end to see where we stood and if a sub 3 in a few months was actually going to be a realistic dream. Here's an overview of the pacing strategy that I gave Steve for his test marathon. I settled on a descending pacing strategy where he negative split every 10K. So as you can see, we started out at a pace that was equivalent to a 3-hour 10 to a 3-hour 13 marathon. And we keep descending by around a 3-minute increment in terms of finishing time. So 310, 306, 303, and 259 as the fastest equivalent splits. Now, how did Steve do as he worked his way through this? Well, incredibly, he ran a 3:02:17 marathon by doing this pacing strategy. And get this, his fastest 1K, 5K, 10K all came in the very last 10K of the race. He just continuously got faster start to finish. What we started with was essentially Steve's what could you do next weekend pace. And like what I got you to do, we started to progress from what was known to what was potentially capable. And this is how you race by removing the benchmark bias. What happens when we introduce the benchmark bias, and how did Steve get on in his sub 3-hour attempt? Well, 3 hours and 54 seconds. Only a minute 23 faster. And where was Steve's fastest 1K, 5K, 10K? All in the first half of the race. Steve did what so many runners do when suffering from the benchmark bias, myself included. He started with what he hoped to do and tried to move forward from there. When you do this too early in the marathon, you'll burn too much carbohydrate from your stored glycogen. That's what we need at the end of the marathon, not the beginning. And no amount of supplementation will be able to overcome this. You'll accumulate lactate and acidity and subsequently build fatigue too quickly and inevitably hit the wall at some point over the later stages. There's also the consideration of heat, because the more work your muscles do, the more heat they produce. So we want to do that later, not earlier, because if we take into account Tim Noakes' theory on anticipatory regulation, our subconscious mind will slow our body when it senses that the rate of carbohydrate utilization and heat accumulation is greater than what we perceive we can sustain for the remainder of the event. That's why it's always better to start slightly too slow and then slightly too fast. And why I want you guys to try this, what could you do next weekend exercise during your next marathon build up? So as you work through your marathon data, as I explained in this video, you're removing the benchmark bias. You're starting with what you know you can do rather than what you hope to do. All right, guys, all the best with your training. I'll see you on the next one.